Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone remembered you? Not for what you said, but for how you made them feel. In a world obsessed with loud voices and flashy impressions, real class speaks softly. It's not in the suit, not in the watch. It's in the pause before you speak, the way you shake someone's hand, the glance that says, "I'm fully here." This video isn't about etiquette rules written in some dusty old book. It's about the subtle habits, the invisible signals that separate the forgettable from the unforgettable. If you're the kind of man who wants to command respect without demanding it, if you believe presence matters more than performance, then stay with me, because these 10 signs of true class, most people miss them, but the men who master them, they don't just enter a room, they own it. 1. The handshake, a mark of confidence. In today's society, where people often judge each other within the first few seconds, a seemingly simple handshake becomes a powerful message. It's not just a greeting ritual, it's a way you convey a part of your identity, calmness, sincerity, and self-respect. At an investment conference in New York, John, a young entrepreneur without much reputation, was introduced for the first time to a seasoned investor. Many before him had tried to impress with fancy words or aggressive approaches. John was different. He stepped forward, gave a slight smile, extended a handshake with just the right firmness, not forced, not weak, paired with direct eye contact and a simple line. "It's a pleasure to meet you." No showmanship, but clarity. No flattery, but genuine respect. Later, the investor shared that it was that very handshake that made him stop and want to hear more. "I sensed a kind of steadiness in him, and in the volatile world of business, that's rare." A handshake, when done right, can be the strongest introduction you'll ever give, without saying a single slogan. It shows that you don't need to strain to prove anything, because you're already grounded in who you are. And sometimes, that alone is the most trustworthy thing. 2. The power of silence. In an era where everyone rushes to speak up in order to prove their worth, silence, at the right moment in the right way, becomes an invisible form of power. It is not awkwardness or weakness, but the sign of someone who has learned to control himself and create space for others to be present. At a job interview in Silicon Valley, when asked, "What's your biggest failure?" the candidate, a young software engineer, didn't answer right away. He bowed his head slightly and stayed silent for a few seconds. The room seemed to pause, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he was genuinely reflecting. Then, when he finally spoke, his answer was coherent, deep, and unflinchingly honest. The recruiter later recalled, "I wasn't just impressed by the answer, but by the silence before it. It told me he thinks before he speaks, and he dares to face himself." Silence, when used well, is a wordless statement with great weight. It shows that you don't need to rush to prove yourself or interrupt a conversation to stand out. In a noisy world, the man who knows how to be silent at the right time doesn't just make others listen. He earns their respect. 3. Waiting before responding. In conversations, whether in a company meeting or at the family dinner table, there's something that seems simple but is rarely done. Waiting until the other person finishes speaking before responding. It sounds easy, but in reality, many people are too busy thinking about what they'll say next to actually listen. At a strategy meeting in Chicago, while the team was discussing a marketing plan, a female colleague shared a new idea. As she spoke, some people began looking impatient. One shifted in his seat, another interrupted. But Mark, the team leader, sat still, hands resting on the table, eyes focused. He waited until she was completely done, then offered feedback gently, pointing out strengths and asking open-ended questions. The tone of the meeting shifted for the better, and others began adjusting their communication style too. Waiting before responding isn't just polite. It's the foundation of respect and maturity in communication. It shows you're listening not to react, but to understand. And when someone feels truly heard, they open up more, and you, naturally, become a person of influence. Not because you talk a lot, but because you know when it's time to speak. 4. Subtle body language. There are people who walk into a room without saying a word, yet all eyes turn toward them. Not because they're loud, nor because they're trying to draw attention, but because they know how to be present through subtle, natural, and composed body language. At a creative industry party in Los Angeles, David, a young director, wasn't the most famous person in the room. He didn't push into conversation circles or speak up just to be noticed. Instead, he stood tall, with relaxed shoulders, arms neither crossed nor in his pockets, eyes alert, and a soft smile whenever speaking with someone. He wasn't rushing, and he wasn't performing. He was simply present, appropriately and with quiet elegance. By the end of the evening, 3 people had approached him for contact details, not because they knew who he was, but because they wanted to know who he was. Body language, when used correctly, can convey messages that hundreds of words cannot. A steady posture doesn't just show confidence, it says you are in control of yourself. You don't need to put on a show because your calm presence is enough to draw people in. In a world full of showmanship, subtlety becomes the most refined art. 5. The posture of listening, when silence speaks volumes. People often think that to leave a good impression in conversation, you have to say something smart or witty. But sometimes it's the silence, when paired with the right posture of listening, that makes others feel most valued. At a personal development seminar in Boston, the keynote speaker, a man who had been through many life trials, was sharing his journey of overcoming mental breakdown after losing a loved one. In that large auditorium, many were distracted, some on their phones, others nodding off out of politeness. But Lisa, a senior student, was different. She sat upright, leaned in slightly, and kept her eyes on the speaker. She didn't say a word, but her whole posture seemed to say, "I'm here, and I'm listening with full respect." After the talk, the speaker walked down, shook her hand, and said, "Thank you. The way you listened made me feel like what I went through mattered." Listening is not a passive act. It's a deep form of connection that requires no words. A complete listening posture, no crossed arms, no phone scrolling, no wandering gaze, tells the other person, "You matter, and I truly care." In this noisy world, sometimes the most valuable gift you can offer is your full presence. 6. Leaving a conversation gracefully, when goodbye becomes a lasting impression. We often focus on how to start a conversation, but pay little attention to how we end it. Yet the way you leave can leave a more lasting impression than the words you say. A timely, polite, and gentle goodbye is an open ending, not a shutdown. At a networking event for startups in San Francisco, Emma, a UX designer, was chatting with a programmer from New York. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes, natural, meaningful, and easygoing. When she noticed the crowd starting to shift and sensed it was the right moment, Emma smiled, kept eye contact, and said, "It was a pleasure chatting with you. I won't take up more of your time. I hope we'll have a chance to collaborate in the future." She offered a gentle handshake, then walked away, firmly, yet unhurriedly. The man later shared, "She made me feel like the conversation had value, not cut short, not dragged out. Very few people can do that." Knowing when to stop is a sign of refinement. In social interactions, leaving at the right time with a courteous farewell not only leaves a good impression, but also opens the door to future encounters. A man or woman of class isn't just someone who knows how to enter a conversation, but someone who knows how to exit it as well. 7. Genuinely caring about someone's story when listening becomes an act of love. In a world full of distractions and noise, someone who pauses to truly listen to you, not to reply, not to compare, but simply to understand, is incredibly precious. And genuinely caring about another person's story is never just a social courtesy. It's a sign of emotional maturity and kindness. At a small gathering in Seattle, Tom, a software engineer, listened to his close friend talk about her volunteer trip to a poor rural area in Mexico. He didn't interrupt to say he'd traveled there too, nor did he rush to judge or nod absent-mindedly. Instead, he asked, "What did you feel standing among those children?" And then quietly waited for her response. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, and a grateful smile appeared on her face. After the conversation, she shared, "No one's ever asked me that before. I felt truly seen." Listening is a form of presence, and when you truly care, you don't need to try. Sincerity will speak for itself. In relationships, whether with friends, co-workers, or romantic partners, caring about someone's feelings, not just the events they describe, determines the depth of your connection. Caring is an art, and the one who knows how to care properly is always the one most remembered. 8. Communicating through eye contact, when trust begins with a look. Some things don't need to be said. A well-timed look is enough. In communication, eye contact doesn't just reflect emotion. It also reveals presence, honesty, and a person's trustworthiness. A steady yet gentle gaze can be more powerful than 100 convincing words. At a job interview in Denver, Sarah, a recent graduate, was asked, "What are your long-term goals in this industry?" She didn't rush to answer. First, she held steady eye contact with the interviewer, not stiff, not evasive. Throughout her response, she didn't glance down at the table or look around as if recalling a script. Her eyes stayed focused, accompanied by a soft smile and a clear, articulate voice. After the interview, the recruiter said, "I trusted her from the first look, not because she was perfect, but because she was truly present." Eye contact is the art of connection. Not forced, not intense, but just enough for the other person to feel your sincerity. Holding eye contact properly doesn't just show confidence, it helps others trust you. In a world where most gazes are fixed on phone screens, a look that truly pauses and listens is what sets you apart. 9. Double-checking before you act. Caution that builds lasting trust. In a world running at breakneck speed, quick reactions and fast decisions are often praised. But in this fast-paced rhythm, the person who pauses to double-check stands out, not because they avoid mistakes, but because they inspire trust. Michael, a customer service specialist in Houston, is known for his attention to detail. Before sending any email to a major client, he always takes a few extra minutes to review his wording, verify the recipient's name, and confirm all details. Once, in a contract email worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, he spotted a misplaced decimal point in the payment section. Had he not reviewed it, the result wouldn't just have been confusion. It could have cost the company its credibility. After being praised for his carefulness, Michael simply said, "I don't want to send out anything I'm not ready to take full responsibility for." Double-checking isn't about doubting yourself. It's proof of professionalism and accountability. Whether it's a message, a promise, or a long-term plan, taking a few seconds to review is always a wise move. In work or in life, a cautious person isn't a slow one. They're someone who refuses to rush into avoidable mistakes. 10. Not interrupting others. When silence becomes the highest form of respect. In conversations, what matters isn't just what you say, but when you choose to speak. and when you choose not to. Interrupting someone doesn't just break their train of thought. It also unintentionally sends the message, "What I'm about to say matters more than what you're saying." Sometimes just one interruption is enough to damage the respect and trust in a relationship. At a strategy meeting in Atlanta, a young female employee was sharing a new idea to improve customer experience. Though a few in the room appeared impatient, Alex, the team leader, remained still, eyes forward, hands off the table and phone. He didn't rush her, didn't cut in. He simply listened fully. When she finished, Alex calmly offered feedback and encouragement. "That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing." The mood in the room immediately changed. Others began listening more attentively, and the speaker gained a boost of confidence. Respecting someone's turn to speak isn't just basic courtesy. It's a mark of emotional intelligence and leadership maturity. A truly mature person knows not only when to speak, but also when to let others speak from the heart, because sometimes being able to speak fully is exactly what someone needs to shine. Conclusion. Subtlety is a way of living, not a tactic. The seemingly small gestures, a handshake, a look, the way you listen, or how you exit a conversation, aren't just social rituals. They are mirrors of your inner world, proof of your maturity, self-control, and inner dignity. A classy man doesn't need to show off. It's the subtlety, calmness, and empathy in his daily actions that earn him real respect. Start with the little things, because those are what quietly shape the image you leave in others' hearts. Deep, steady, and unmistakably yours.